podcaster, I hardly know her.
Welcome to the I Hardly Know Her podcast, hosted by me, Megan McCaleb. If there's one thing I've learned in this life, it's that I still have a lot to learn. This podcast is your invitation to expand your understanding on all sorts of topics and shake things up a little bit. Listen in and learn something new from the stories, professional insights, and a wide range of expertise shared by me and my incredible guests. And remember, my friends, you don't have to be a big deal to do big things. Hey everyone, welcome back to the I Hardly Know Her podcast. I'm excited as always. You know I'm excited to join forces with awesome people in the world who are making an impact and bringing fun energy and inspiring stories. And today is right in line with those objectives. With me, as always, is my producer, Jeanette, and my partner in crime with Improv Team Culture. And today's guest is actually someone that Jeanette recommended. And already in the pre-show, as we were prepping, I can tell that you are all in for a treat as we jump in with Quinn Wilson. So, Jeanette, I'm going to throw it over to you to give an appropriate intro, because I loved all the things that you were telling me about him and why you thought he would be such an excellent voice for our listeners to hear on the podcast.
I'd love to. Listeners. So Quinn and I have known each other probably for about 8 or 9 years now at this point. And we started doing comedy in Chicago, not around the same time, but we got on a group together at Comedy Sports. And Quinn is just like an all-around great person. And when I moved to LA, he had already been out there hustling and moving, and he was a really safe space and a great person for me to start building my community out there. We, got excited about the same types of stuff. And we actually had a podcast during the pandemic for the first year, the Bygone Despot podcast. But when Quinn is not making me just grin from ear to ear, he's doing a lot of really good work in the community, and he uses his talent in art and comedy and just like humanity for a lot of good. So I'm really excited for Quinn to talk about what he is bringing to the world since the last time I've seen him, which is probably 3 or 4 years ago.
Awesome. Ooh, and he's muted. Welcome to the show, Quinn.
An unmuted hello. How are you doing, everybody? Air horn, air horn.
Great. Oh my gosh, that's my kid's favorite thing. They're always like, ooh, about pretty much everything. When we like
the air horn has been with us for 20, 30 years, and it has not lost steam. It's been here forever. And I don't think it's going anywhere.
I hope not. Let's never let it go anywhere but at the forefront of our lives. So
Hashtag
Quinn,
air horn forefront.
Wait, what's that? You love the forefront?
Hashtag forefront air horn.
Yeah, I love it. Yep. That's going to be the new trending hashtag. So I'm just kind of getting to know you, but I checked out your website, and I think it's amazing when people use their talents to bring awareness to things that are really important. And so for those of you out there listening, I'll make sure it's in the show notes as well. But you run a company called What Matters Productions, and you help bring light to really important issues that are essentially happening all around us, but things that a lot of times people are more comfortable turning away from because we don't really know how to help when there's problems, I think, in the world. It makes people uncomfortable, which is unfortunate. So I'm really curious, like, what was sort of the launching point of you realizing where there were needs in our communities and how you could use your talent to shine a light where we need some light shown?
Yeah. So, mid-20s in Chicago, doing the comedy thing, writing, directing, kind of growing as a director. I had kind of 4 guys that I would kind of like mentor and look after. Homelessness has always kind of been like my core issue. We're the richest country in the history of the world. We have 600,000 people sleeping on the street tonight in America. We could easily end all of that in the snap of our fingers, but we choose to allocate our funds and our money the way we do, and it's very sad to me. So, homelessness has always been a core issue for me. I kind of came to know these 4 young men experiencing homelessness in and out of through an ex-girlfriend of mine who was a pastor of a church, and the church was very like, Jesus was a hippie liberal that was like out there fighting to like give everybody equality, which was great. And so Calvin, Corey, DB, and Jaleel were kind of like my 4 guys, like anywhere between like 18 and 24. Most of them had no real family support. Most of them had no, I would say most of them did not have a high school diploma. They're kind of just getting by day to day in the youth shelter system in Chicago. And Calvin was one of these guys. Calvin is like the sweetest guy I've ever met in my life. He's warm and caring and tender and sweet and kind and conscious and all these things, while also getting kicked out of his parents' house at 16 for coming out to them as gay. And so he was out on the streets, and I'm going to drink some water, cut it out later.
Go for it.
Sorry.
You're fine.
So anyway, Calvin was one of my guys, and he was about to age out of the youth shelter system, which means, you know, he was going to have to go into cage shelters. And it gets a lot harder once you're out of the youth shelter system to actually make it out of homelessness, particularly in Chicago. So we made this little 3-minute doc about Calvin, and we did an interview, and we interviewed some loved ones of his and some people that knew him well that had, status and ability. We shot a bunch of great little setups and B-roll, and we just kind of helped him tell his story, which is a perspective we always take, that it's like, we're not the storytellers. Our subjects are the storytellers. We're here, to help them tell their story. So we helped him tell a story, and we launched like a little GoFundMe, and we made a little Facebook teaser trailer for it. And we raised like $10,000 for him in like 2-3 days. And we were like, oh, okay, maybe there's something here to this model, to this formula. And with that, we started What Matters Productions. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. We make there's my knees, everybody. Enjoy those. We make micro docs for nonprofits so they can share their story and fundraise. So we've helped nonprofits by raising about $2 million to date, and that's what we do.
That's amazing. First of all, I hope everyone is watching instead of listening to this episode, so they got to see a quick peek of your knees.
Left and right. 2 for 2.
So perfect. Is there a strategy too that you help guide people to get these documentaries in front of the right eyes so that you can make that impact? Like what type of what needs to happen to make sure that the right people are seen so that their heartstrings are tugged and then we're getting the money flowing? Talk to me about that.
Yeah. So I am like, my day job is I'm a director for mostly commercials. Doc and comedy are my 2 genres. I just did a job Monday with Aaron Rodgers in New York. Brag, brag, brag. So I'm a storyteller. I'm a filmmaker. I know how to use the tools and language of cinema to elicit reaction from an audience. So, mostly what we do is that we find the stories in collaboration with the nonprofits. We build the narrative, we shoot, we edit, we deliver the content. Usually the nonprofits are more involved in the distribution, the rollout, the fundraising. Excuse me. What a day I'm having here with my esophagus. We are typically the nonprofits go, we have a big gala, we have a fundraising event, we have some big event, we invite a bunch of wealthy people, they come and give money, and usually they play our film like right before like the ask, because most people are like, we help homelessness, and people are like, cool, great, but what does that really mean? Well, here's one person's story and what they've had to overcome and how this nonprofit helped them overcome homelessness, and this is what you're donating to. You're not donating to like an amorphous URL, but like these are the people that you're helping. And we actually just had another project, Raylan's Story, we did last year, and that just got into like its 10th film festival. Leonard's Story we did last year, got nominated for an Emmy. And we're trying to bring really high-end production to an area of focus that usually does not get that. So that's what we do.
Ooh, that's fantastic. I have worked a lot over the years in nonprofits, as far as like I've emceed a lot of galas. I have served on the board for a nonprofit, and it is always interesting to sort of see the behind the scenes part, having the heart story that tugs on the heartstrings. Also living in the small community that I live in, I saw a lot of the same wealthy faces showing up at all the galas. And then there was like the battle of the paddles of who which is a good thing. I'm like, hey, let's get as
Yeah,
much.
honestly, lean into it, you know?
Yeah, let's get those the beverages flowing and get those paddles raising, and it is super important to see, like, to really understand where the money is going. And I think that's one of the things that's been a challenge actually for the agency. I've served on the board for an adoption agency and have for 6 or 7 years, and we're really just finally starting to go, well, let's formalize a little more strategy here, because there's such an enormous need, and like 400,000 kids and teens at any given time are in the foster system, which probably have some parallels and overlap, I would assume, with some of the homeless population as well, because they are floaters and a lot of times age out of the system in a not a good structure laying before them. But there's so many different moving parts that, like, really figuring out what is an element that you can, I mean, how do you determine that? Like, I'm in it and I'm sometimes still, I only have to do certain parts of it, but to really go, this amount of money goes to this and this amount of money can go to this. Like, how do you help guide an organization or a cause to really put a tangible deliverable that makes sense?
Yeah. I mean, we have kind of like 3 different models of trying to put money together to do something, because again, everyone on these jobs we do will come out well below their day rate because they care about the cause and they want to do it. But there's certain hard costs. Like, you gotta be in a location, you gotta feed people, you gotta have the equipment. Like, it depends on the gig. But so sometimes we will, we'll go to the nonprofit and say, like, find one wealthy donor that normally cuts a big check every year, killing me, and have them donate it to this then microdoc will amplify their donation and more people will be encouraged to donate.
Wow.
Sometimes we say, let's do a brand partnership. Let's find a brand that kind of fits the message and the mission and the world that you're in, and then see if we can make, it's a win-win for everybody. And then sometimes we say, just come up with whatever number you can in-house and we'll stretch that as far as we can. So always depends. We always want to try to give the most bang for the buck, but there are some hard costs to cover. And so that's
Sure.
always tricky, but it also depends. We did a project where we went to Burkina Faso, West Africa, and we worked with a nonprofit that does a lot of work around like water access and feminine hygiene products. And they're doing a lot. Burkina Faso is one of the poorest countries in the world. 50% of citizens don't have access to like roads, electricity, and running water. It is, they're like living out in like the bush is the language they use.
Yeah.
And so we did that where we were like, fly us, house us, and feed us. Like, we just want to go. Like, I'm holding the camera. Like, I'm not a cinematographer at all, but I'm like, I came up, in high school, I learned how to do everything in film school. So like I could do it. But we were like, yeah, we just want to go to this place and do these things. I went with my producing partner, Kelsey Bunner, shout out. She's fantastic. She's a producer and actress in LA, and we work together a lot on all these projects.
Now, you mentioned on our intake form that you could just rant a little bit, and I want to give you that freedom a bit about, besides at the fancy galas and the things where people are showing up intentionally to do some good, what are some things like in this space with the podcast? I know a lot of my listeners are people who want to do more, want to do better. They're really a lot of people who are hungry to understand more, but we feel helpless and not really sure what some next steps are. I would love to invite you to rant a little bit about what are some of those things that you really know to be true in the space of homelessness, and what are, I don't know, I don't even want to guide it necessarily, other than like, what are those things that you're fired up about? How do we get involved?
Invitation accepted. Here I go.
Perfect.
Yeah. I mean, the number one thing I would say to anybody listening is listen to where you feel called and listen to where you feel like the need is. If some people are so touched by certain things, some people are like animals, the dogs. And I'm like, I love that. The dogs are fantastic. That is not personally where I feel pulled. And so I'm not going to put my time and space there. We need to help all the dogs and cats. That's a very worthy cause. And if that's where your heart is telling you to go, then go there. I'm much more pulled to homelessness. I'm much more pulled to equanimity, equality issues, like across the board. So go where you feel called, and then do fucking something. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, but I did, because there is, if you are born into I'll say it this way. I went to Burkina Faso. if you happen to be born into a body in Burkina Faso, the average age of life is like 42, 45. You get 45.
Mm.
The United States of America, it's like 75, 78. So literally by the chance of you got born into a body, into an American body, you literally get to live twice as long of a life as somebody who's born into Burkina Faso. Absolutely insane. Doesn't make any sense. So what are you going to do with that time? Pick the thing that you're called to do and go do something about it. The number one way to do it, I think, is build relationships, particularly in the homelessness space. More often than not, people go, oh, that poor person on the side of the street. What do I do? Well, you go up and you say hi. That's like the first thing you do. You go, hey, I'm Quinn. What's going on? I'm just out here trying to get a little hotel room for the night, man. Yeah, I feel you, dude. I don't think I can help you with the hotel room, but like, do you need help accessing services? What's going on? What do you need? Oh, yeah, I was at this one shelter, but I kind of got in a fight with this guy and they kicked me out because he was stealing my shit. And so but I had to defend myself. No, totally. I feel that, dude. Why don't I see if I can call a shelter for you? And if I can like get you in an Uber, I'll send you over there in a shelter. In Chicago specifically, there's 311. In LA specifically, there's all these different resources, but like this is a global issue, but it's also a very local issue.
Yeah.
So, whatever community you're in, like learn the rhythm and rhyme of that community and like where do you send people. I almost never give money to somebody on the street, and it's not because they're going to use drugs and they're going to do whatever. It's because I like schedule out my giving very intentionally to different organizations at the beginning of the year and set it up on an auto pay. And then if somebody needs help accessing services, I try to introduce them to the services they need, and that's going to vary city to city, but on the whole, people want community. I'm on the board of another nonprofit called Share a Meal in Los Angeles. We roll burritos from a food truck 5 days a week. And then we walk around LA, different neighborhoods, and just hand them out. And the thing more often than not is like people just want somebody to chat with. They just want somebody to like look at them in the eye and like tell them they're doing okay and like give them a smile and crack a joke and chill for a minute and head out.
Yeah. Well, and if people, so you're talking about like whatever they feel called to look into, I mean, it's a Google search away probably for the most part of like what nonprofits or what organizations or resources exist in my direct community on this subject matter. Right. I mean, I'm assuming that's the case. I'm like, I actually haven't necessarily gone in and Googled on a certain thing, but I bet that's the case. And being able to like figure out what are some of those immediate resources to when you're having the conversations to know where to send them. I mean, that might sound really ultra basic, but is it just that easy for finding resources of being a connector?
Yeah, it's really not super hard. I mean, a lot of times folks facing homelessness are struggling to have access to Wi-Fi or having a phone that has any service or connection. So literally sometimes it's like internet access is such a thing that we can kind of mediate with. But yeah, more often than not in every community, if you say, I want to volunteer at X, there's a great website, idealist.org. Idealist.org is a great website to like link people to. And that's like a global thing and there's stuff all over. But in your local community, no matter where you live in America, there's at least a shelter. There's at least a food pantry or a food bank. There's at least a couple of these things, and shoot them an email and say, hey, I'm interested in coming in and volunteering. If you have any openings, my schedule is X. Is there any way you could put me on a shift the next week? And then just go in and check it out. And if you didn't vibe with it or it didn't feel right or you weren't like thrilled by it, then don't go back. But like I pitched a show for a while called Volunteer With Me, where I would just go to these different nonprofits around the world and volunteer, because honestly, it's medicine. Like it feels so good, and you let go of all, like you show up somewhere and you're like, I'm late to this thing and I didn't send that email and my boss is blah, 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 blah. And like all that falls away when someone's like, hi, I don't have food. Can I have food? And you're like, dude, totally. Let me get you some bread here. What's going on? Like, that's what we're made to do. And we spend all our time like putting these walls in front of us that kind of divide us from each other. And it's not hard to build that community if we put a little bit of effort into it.
Totally. What does like long-term success look like? Like if people are starting to make steps and maybe some resources are being activated. I think this is coming to mind because I recently watched a documentary. I can't remember what it's called, but I just watched a documentary on homelessness not too long ago on Hulu or Netflix or one of the streaming, doesn't matter. And I remember a couple of them talking about the specific problem of how the cycle just continues to repeat. And it's really a hard pattern to break. So how do we position it or set it up for the best chances of success? How do we have touch points to maintain it?
Totally. So context is this, right? Like most people, and I would say the majority of Americans grew up in some sort of a household where their basic needs were met. They got enough of an education. They were kind of put out the door onto their own with at least enough knowledge, financial support, and resources to be able to like baby bird fly out of the nest and like get their own apartment and get a job and like figure it out. Most of us have that opportunity. But there are at the same time so many of us that are raised in the foster care system and like don't really have fun. Calvin, my buddy, like kicked out of the house at 16, didn't have a high school degree, didn't really have applicable job training and skills, particularly living in an economy where you can work a minimum wage job all day every day and you can't afford a place to live. Like, you know, that's like a structural thing that we need to talk about when we talk about homelessness. There's not a single market in the United States of America with over 100,000 people where you can afford a 2-bedroom apartment on 2 minimum wage salaries. So like the whole system is fucking upside down, backwards, broken, shattered into 1,000 pieces. So that's number one. Number two, you know, what most people deep in the work would say is like, you know what ends homelessness? Housing. Like housing ends homelessness. It's pretty straightforward. Do we want to have a government subsidy housing 24/7 for someone's entire life? Probably not. That's probably not the best way to match that into the system that exists already. But you can't go like, well, just go get a job, hippie. It's like, okay, so I got a job, but like, what do I do now? Like I'm working a job, but I'm sleeping on a bench, or I'm working a job and I'm sleeping in a shelter. Like people need a couple of years of a stable living environment to allow themselves to get back into a rhythm in a working way, to allow themselves to build this stability to be self-sufficient. The other piece of the puzzle is in 1980, a president by the name of Ronald Reagan essentially cut all the funding for mental health in America and like kicked everybody out of institutions and onto the streets. So we, you know, a lot of folks living on the streets do have some sort of mental health issue that is being untreated, unaddressed, and that then feeds into the medical system. And the medical system, as we know in America, is the best in the world, except it's not by any stretch of the imagination. Because in fact, the number one reason an American goes homeless is, any guess, can't pay a medical bill. I have a friend, Lloyd, who lived in a tent in a park in Echo Park in Los Angeles. He had a bachelor's degree and he had a corporate job for like a decade. Family wasn't around, didn't have parents to fall back on, didn't have cousins or aunts and uncles to fall back on, got a very serious illness, put him in the hospital for like 9 months straight. After 6 months, he lost his job. And how do we give people healthcare in America? Well, you have to have a full-time job to get healthcare, because you only deserve to be healthy if you can have a full-time job and climb the corporate ladder. So he's now in the hospital, can't go back to work, lost his health insurance. The bills have piled up and they eventually kicked him out, and he's living in a tent in a park. He eventually got out of that, and because he built good relationships and he was the one going to the assembly meetings and city council meetings, he got a 2-year bridge housing program, and in that time was able to get himself some stability and is taking care of himself and is fine now. But most people, you know, are dealing with a lot of issues. The very last thing I'll say, and then I'll turn it back over, is the average face of homelessness in America is not the guy on the corner with the cup. It's actually a single parent and a child. Like the majority of people facing homelessness in America are single parent and child, and they're under sheltered, or they're, you know, there's another term for it, I'm forgetting, but mom and daughter, they're living out of a car. Mom and daughter the daughter goes to stay with the aunt for a little bit. The mom goes and tries to get a housekeeping thing, and then she picks up the daughter, and then they go. Like the majority of it is not the stuff you're seeing. The majority of it, the data sees, you know? Yeah.
Well, folks, you heard it here first. It's a hopeless mess. No, I'm just kidding. I'm totally kidding. I think what's important though, and actually where I want to take it next, is that there's so many moving parts that it actually means there's got to be something that any one of us can choose to focus on to be helping with the different cogs. Because it does not only have a domino effect, but it also, there's so many connected things. And I'm actually now really curious, like, maybe you already know this, or maybe I need to go do some research myself of like, how many of these different organizations or different components are talking to each other in order to meet needs and find solutions, because they all really need to be more collaborative in order to make sure that we're creating a space for people to have the time and resources required to regain stability and to have a foundation enough to carry it on, hopefully for their lifetime, and break the cycle for the next generation. So I joke a little bit, but also it is actually even more opportunity for us to get involved, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the thing that's tricky is like you've got federal system, you've got HUD, you've got like national organizations, then you've got state agencies at every level, then you've got local agencies at every level, then you've got the Red Crosses and the United Ways and the huge like umbrella nonprofits that are kind of all over, and then you've got very small localized nonprofits in everywhere. But then you've got church congregations and religious communities that are working to ameliorate the issue. And there are so many different moving parts, and a lot of them are not talking to each other at all. One
Yeah.
specific organization I'd love to shout out is All Chicago. I've done a lot of work with them over the years. They're an amazing organization because they're like, we're not the most like flashy, but we're in charge of the data. We're in charge of like, we get big state grants and then we disseminate them based on which small DSPs, direct service providers, are doing the best in terms of the data. So it's like, we do need to bring tech into all of this. We do need to bring like engineers into all of this. But if you're an engineer or you're a techie, you go, I can make 180 a year at Google, or I can make 50 a year for this nonprofit. Most people go work for Google, and there's no shame in that, but then take whatever percent of that difference and donate it. Like, we are all incredibly wealthy by a global standard. And there's, a lot more we can be doing with our dollars and more importantly with our time.
Yeah. One of the things that just came to mind a moment ago was I think I do a lot of like public speaking coaching, and a lot of people over the years have told me how much like a certain experience or something happened where they want to start a nonprofit. Like so many people just want to start these nonprofits for this certain cause. And I also used to do contract work for a women's business center that was a statewide organization. And I was like, we're reinventing the wheel constantly instead of just being like, okay, if you're passionate about this topic, do a little bit of research to see who's already doing that thing. And then it'd be way easier to just swoop in and be a helpful body, more hours and time and brain power and ideas and things to complement work that's already been laid out there. It just kind of amazes me sometimes that there's a little bit of a disconnect there, and not to dig on that at all, but it is a really big undertaking to start a nonprofit and to run a nonprofit and to fund a nonprofit. And then I think people get really tunnel visioned on like, now I have this brand new thing to launch, instead of where can we look and see what things are already there and find the ones that are really being effective and enhancing, instead of starting from scratch so many times.
I think I totally agree with that as a guy who started his own nonprofit. I totally, with the collaboration with many other people, but I do totally agree with that because the only thing I would say is we do need work at all levels. You do need the Red Crosses to be able to go, there was a earthquake in Haiti and instantly I'm mobilizing tons of money and tons of resources, and I can quickly move because we have stuff set up everywhere. And then you need the medium organizations that are like, we have a little more money, can like do a little bit more, but we still are actually in tune in like what's going on the ground. And then you need the micro organizations, and Share a Meal in LA is one of those organizations. The thing that organization does better than most any other is relationships. Like we can name the people on our routes and where they are usually at and what's going on in their life. And like and then that data and that information is important to go, hey, actually, we've been hearing a lot more that X is really a bigger issue, and that Y, which we thought was an issue, Y is not so much of an issue anymore, blah, 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 blah. So you need people at all levels, but I do totally agree that from the 0 to 1 level, like it is a lot of work and it's a lot of time and it's a lot of energy, and just be intentional. Like just be intentional with your time and your energy.
Yeah, for sure. I love your energy. I want to know, like, when you're getting fired up about stuff, like, is it with excitement because of the information you have or the potential of what really is possible? I don't know if you can pinpoint that or if I am just sounding crazy. But I would love for more people to feel about something the way you very clearly feel about your work and your cause that you are serving. How can we inspire people to like harness that power
I
Like,
think everybody has that in them all the time. I think most people don't listen. And I
mm,
don't mean that in any sort of negative sense, but like we're in the society where 24/7 constantly it's here's the scroll, here's the feed, mom wants that, cousin wants that, kid needs this, blah, blah, blah. It's just a nonstop thing in front of us all the time. I come from like a if any persuasion, like a Buddhist persuasion, not the mala. And yeah, meditation to me is really important to be able, and it doesn't have to be meditation, it doesn't have to be Buddhist, but just quiet intention setting time, like listening, like putting everything else away and quieting your mind and yourself, and hearing what is going on within yourself and what you need and what you're working on. And then listening when you're out in the world, when you cross the street and you see somebody with a change cup, does your heart break, or do you not really think about it too much? If you're in a park and there's a dog with a broken foot and he's gimping around, do you not worry about it so much, or does your heart break? Like, what breaks your heart? And then try to heal yourself by doing the work.
mm. I love that. One of the comments that you also said that I think as we kind of bring things here on this home stretch of, you mentioned, now where did it go? I scrolled. Oh, you had something just as a thing to highlight, and it was to chase your dreams. And so I think it's great that your nonprofit is actually encompassing causes you care about and a skill set that you are delighted to use. So in adding on to that with motivating the listeners out there of like, how can we be healing our hearts? Like, how can people tie together their dreams, their wildest dreams, and the things they're super passionate about, and do good in the world?
I mean, the bottom line is most people just got to start doing shit. Like, I feel like so many of us are like, I want to do this, I want to do that, blah, 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 and then nobody does anything. And that's fine. It's life's hard and things get busy. And I want to see the new episode of The Office too. But like, pick something and go do it. Like 1 hour a week of your time spent in service of any sort it's almost insane to me that that's not like part of our culture. I've traveled to 28 countries around the world, and in so many other cultures or faith practices or whatever, like service is like baked into the rhythm. Like you have to do this, of course. And it's not so much the case in America, because America is all about like fame and money and go do it, and I'm the biggest and the best, and those things have their place in time. But I think just getting people excited about doing anything, I think, is great. I had a whole thing and I lost it. What was the setup? Give me the setup again.
How do people chase their dream
Cool.
and like get all that fire and do good
Yeah.
simultaneously?
Yeah. I mean, again, most people are really good at some things, and most people really care about some things. So like, feel free to draw the line there. I'm a filmmaker who really cares about homelessness, and we do all sorts of different causes, but homelessness is our primary one. So I'm going to make docs about homelessness. If you're a software developer and you really think it's atrocious that 4,500 children are dying today because they don't have access to clean drinking water, and 4,500 children died yesterday because they don't have access to clean drinking water, and 4,500 will die again tomorrow because they don't have access to clean drinking water. And on the whole, we don't really care. Like, people don't really care, because if we did, it would be 4,200, and it's not. It's still 4,500. Nobody really gives a shit, and that's sad to me. But at the same time, we're in our own little bubbles and we're doing our own little things, and that's why I think looking locally is really important. Like, we're not all going to fly to whatever part of the world and do whatever thing, because that's unrealistic. But I can bet you damn sure the food pantry up the street would love a pair of hands. I can bet you damn sure the the animal shelter around the corner could take somebody to go walk some dogs. Like, there's enough ways to get involved in a little specific way. That's great. It's great if you can tie I'm a software developer and 4,500 children are dying for water. I'm going to call this small nonprofit and go, hey, I can help you with your website. I can help you with your SEO. I can help you with whatever. But it's also just as valuable to I'm going to go down to the pantry and I'm going to stock shelves with boxes. That's totally valuable too. It all is the work. Like, go do the work, whatever that means to you.
Oh, yeah. I remember growing up thinking, you'd see the ads on TV, and I thought that only bad things were happening outside of our country, and growing up and realizing that it does impact our immediate communities, sometimes in our exact same mile radius, and that the opportunity to help and serve is readily available and very much desired by the people that
I
put
was
in that
just in
authority.
Manhattan I was just in Manhattan for a job with Aaron Rodgers, and total bullshitty. But I'm in the train, like on the way out to the airport or wherever, and I mean, just hearing on the MTA or whatever it is, 1 in 4 New Yorkers, 1 in 4 children in New York are facing food insecurity. 1 in 6 Americans are facing food insecurity. So, like, we think which again, to me, if you zoom all the way out, that's politics and that's policy. Like, collectively, we have enough resources so that 4 out of 4 kids in New York are not facing food insecurity, but we're choosing not to allocate them in that way. And I think it's honestly, quite frankly, disrespectful to our fellow Americans that we go, I'm okay with you being unhoused. I'm okay with you being unfed. I'm okay with you being thirsty. It's really disrespectful to me. I'm a freelancer and I make enough money to take care of myself and I do fine. But also, like, in the healthcare system, I'm kind of falling in the cracks. Like, I don't really, I have like catastrophe healthcare, but I don't have
Right.
like go to the doctor and do my whatever healthcare. Because it's just ridiculous what I'm supposed to pay a private company to do to then still bill me every time I do something. My primary residence is in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, and I have a little condo down there. And when I'm not directing, that's where I'm kind of like having my me time. And I got a little infection when I was down there, and I went to the doctor, or I telehealth to the doctor in the States because I was still in my US healthcare at the time. And I said, what do I do? And they go, oh, you need a 10-day antibiotic of this antibiotic, 10 milligrams in the morning, 10 milligrams at night. I went into a pharmacy on the corner in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, and I said, I need a 10-day prescription of this. And I said, sure, here you go, 30 pesos. Didn't require a prescription, didn't require anything. And it cost me 75 cents for a 10-day antibiotic that in the US would cost so much more than that. But because the pharmaceutical companies are making billions of dollars and the healthcare companies are making billions of dollars, there's a lot of money in it. So let's just kind of keep it all going. And, you know, structurally, systemically, we are sick and broken. And we could solve all these issues if we wanted. And we choose not to. I come from a progressive political persuasion of, like, again, we have the resources. Let's like pool them all together and help each other. And not everybody agrees with that. And that's okay. I think I think we can all do the work from whatever political or ethical persuasion we come from. But it's just embarrassing to me. And more often than not, I'm ashamed to be American because of what we have and what we choose to do with it.
Yeah. And on that note, no, I mean, seriously, all we're asking, folks, is that we just give a shit. And that's honestly,
1 hour a week.
Yeah, the honesty is so important because we can't keep turning a blind eye to it and pretending that these things are not problems that could be fixed, because they are. And it's wild. And this is a whole, we could have probably an entire another episode on full episodes of several of the things that you briefly touched on. And these are conversations that need to continue, and people need to ask questions, and we need to push back a little bit for the systems that we are built into. Even my teenager has always been like fighting against being in the matrix. He's like, I don't want to end up coming out of public school plugging into the matrix like everybody else does. This is not the life I want, and I'm going to do my best as a mom, guide my offspring to be autonomous and do things that are different. And I hope our younger generation is going to be equipped, I think they are, to make some real changes that some of us older people and the ones even older are not willing to. Anyway, but no, I mean, it's been super great to have you on here. And I highly encourage people to check out your website. You have 2 different websites that are both really interesting to look at. Obviously, the one that is your namesake, the QuinnWilsonFilm.com, and then WhatMattersProductions.com. The minute I clicked onto it, I was just drawn in, and I want to learn more. And I love to keep myself aware of what's out there, what's happening, so that I can find those opportunities. And I hope that, this is an invitation to listeners to, you don't have to do a ton. It's not tons of money. It's not tons of time. It's just heightening your awareness and activating in your own small way that will fill your cup and make you want to keep giving in whatever way you can. And I feel like that is maybe the moral of the story today is start, just do a little something, and we can make a big difference.
And that's the last thing I wanted to say, if I can jump in, is that, it is an overwhelming problem, and it is an overwhelming amount of things we need to cure in the world. And sometimes that can give you the analysis of paralysis of like, oh my God, but what do I do? This is too much. I can't do it. You just got to do this little bit much. You got to go pick one thing and put 1 hour of time to it, and just pick one issue and get involved a little bit. Everybody does not have to do everything, but I think it would be a better world if everybody did a little something. So just pick a little something and get going.
I love it. Thank you so much, Quinn. I love everything that you've shared. Appreciate your work and being a storyteller and helping other people amplify and show their stories so that we can change hearts and make better choices. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Share this with your friends. We need as many ears as possible to hear this message and hearts to be changed so that we can be serving one another and bringing some more goodness to the humanity around us. And thanks for listening to the I Hardly Know Her podcast. Stay tuned for all the exciting guests that continue to come up on the roster to expand your understanding about things that you might not know a lot about, but that you can have a lot more courage in making new choices with new information. And if you have a story that you want to share and you're not sure where to get started, Jeanette and I are at the helm of all things with better communication through improv team culture, as well as the Ovation speaker training programs. We look forward to staying connected with you guys, and be well. We'll catch you next time.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to the I Hardly Know Her podcast. For information about leadership workshops, public speaker training, and all things Kooky Megan, check out improvteamculture.com. We'll catch you next time.